I'm Stephen Roulston from Ulster University.
I'm Matt Milliken. I'm a researcher at Ulster University.
As part of the Transforming Education project at Ulster University, Matt and I have written a lot about those bits of the education system in this part of the world that are not working as well as they might. We're full of praise for the work of teachers and school leaders and many other professionals working in education, often unsung, but we would both agree that there needs to be fundamental change. And that's threatening to some people. You're taking away our culture, we hear, from both sides. And the accusation can be made, perhaps with some justification, well, what would you put in its place? You're going to sweep away a divided system of education. What does an undivided system look like? Well, that's what Matt and I are going to explore in this webinar. Let's start the debate. What would it look like and how would it work?
Thanks, Stephen. The government, in their wisdom, have announced that they're going to do an independent review of education with a view to introducing a single system. Today, we want to start people's conversations about what a single education system might look like. How would it work? How could we ensure that it's open to all? Through this event, we want to stimulate public debate and discussion, and who knows, those involved in the independent review might even be listening. The system that we have at present works to the benefit of those pupils who gain places at conventionally academically orientated grammar schools, who gain high grades and access places at prestigious university. It has, however, been shown to be failing those young people who are unable to access places at these grammar schools, and that a long tail of underachievement affects those living in communities that suffer the greatest levels of deprivation. The current system of selective education doesn't level up. It preserves privilege and subsidises the education of the already wealthy. The system divides not only by class, but also by religion and community identity.
And that division is not cheap. It's been said that segregation across Northern Ireland costs about £800 million per year across the board to maintain that. And that cost applies in education as well. We just can't afford it, particularly when funding for other services like the NHS are facing real pressures. It's challenging to work out exactly how much we would save if we were to move to a single system of education, but there have been some estimates. Deloitte and Ulster University independently have come up with an estimate which is very similar. Around £57 million every year would be saved. That's £1 million a week. And some estimates put it at much more than that. There's an estimate of 95 million that would be saved if we move to a single system. And it's not just savings in that way. We bus children across the province, not to their nearest school, but to schools that they wish to attend. And that costs at least another £20 million, according to our research, and probably much, much more than that. 130 million miles are travelled that don't need to be travelled each year to attend schools just because they happen to conform to your community or because it's a selective or a non-selective school. And if we move to a system without segregation or selection, only 4% of learners would actually need support with homeschool travel. At the same time, over £1 billion has been spent over the last 10 years bringing our young people into contact with one another. People that live in the same country, and we're spending money to bring them into contact with one another. So, although it's very difficult to get an exact figure, we can conclude the cost of a divided system is huge and it's too much.
Part of that cost is the consequence of a system of administration and education that is mind-blowingly complex. An army of administrators in a multitude of administrative authorities, boards, councils and commissions are paid all out of the public purse. It's in the interest of each to protect their own sector, to maintain separation, and to keep the cash coming. Each sector has its own way of selecting governors. All valiant volunteers, but a proportion of these are chosen for their loyalty to an ethos rather than their skills in the management of personnel, property, or finance. Changing demography has led to the closure of many small schools. But the complexity of ownership responsibility and unresolved legal wrangles means that everywhere empty schools are lying rotting. Rather than saving money, or better still, putting money back into the system through selling off sites for commercial use or housing, The authorities are obliged to maintain and ensure the safety of these mouldering monuments to a failed system. Religious discrimination is embedded in school policy and law. Schools are set up so that the majority, or possibly all, of the governors come from the same faith community. Christianity has a protected status in school assemblies. The RE syllabus has a limited focus on non-Christian faiths, and clerics are permitted to inspect the delivery of RE in schools, while the state's own Education and Training Inspectorate can only enter the school to inspect RE if they have been specially invited in. Governors are empowered to act to ensure that the ethos of the school's founders is protected. Whilst almost every worker in almost every workplace has been able to call on the protection of employment for fair employment laws since the early 1970s, it remains perfectly legal for schools to discriminate between applicants for teaching posts solely on the basis of the church that they attend or don't attend.
It's unsurprising, therefore, that our divided society is reflected in the makeup of schools. 93% of our young people are educated in schools alongside people largely from their own community. And it starts at the age of 3. Most preschools and nurseries are divided by religion, our research found. And report after report show that being educated together in the same classroom as those from other communities is the best way of developing social cohesion. Some worry that it might mean people giving up their community, their tradition, their beliefs and so on, but not at all. We need schools that will celebrate all traditions, and not just the Catholic Protestant ones. The 21st century has brought a very welcome injection of diversity into this part of the world. 1 in 20 of our pupils are now newcomer children. They are part of our community as well. And it's time all of this was reflected in how we educate future generations. So let's talk about this, Matt. So we're going to sweep away the current divided system of education. Replace it with what?
A single system of education.
So you have a hidden agenda here. What you're really pushing is integrated education. You're saying every school has to become an integrated school.
You say potato, I say spud. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it a unified system, a community system, a common system, all children together system, inclusive education, joint education, shared. No, that one's already been taken. Call it anything you want. Just don't get hung up on labels.
But we've been talking for years about educating people together, and survey after survey has said that people want that. We want people educated across the divide. But what would that really look like?
This new system, single system, needs to be based on a set of key principles. It needs to be grounded in the values of the society that we wish to help to create and to serve. It needs to look to the future, not to the past. What is needed now and in the future, not what was appropriate then, or this is how we've always done it. It needs to be less wasteful. We need best value. We need to make the best use of the available resources, physical and human. It needs to respect the diverse society we have. It needs to be inclusive of all groups together, not just those of the same faith, the same community background. It needs social cohesion.
Absolutely, Matt. And the environment as well. A single system has advantages in cutting emissions and pollution, particularly minimising homeschool travel. We talked about the unnecessary travel that there was. Many parents unnecessarily driving their children about. Our research says 20,000 extra tonnes of carbon are emitted into the atmosphere from that travel alone in Northern Ireland. And it's effectiveness as well that we want in our schools. At the end of the day, schools are there for helping learners to become the best they can be, to give them all the opportunities that we can provide for them. A single system of education can do that more efficiently, more fairly, and vitally, it also brings communities together.
From the evidence we have gathered, it seems that if this vision is to become a reality, then the independent review will need to pay particular attention to 6 strategic areas. Firstly, they will need to address the current structures that are responsible for the management of the existing system, and the costly pattern of duplication needs to be dismantled. The system that replaces it needs to be rationalised and simplified. Places will still have to be afforded to those vested interests who have been engaged in educational structures for so very long. But they have to sit within one structure where no concern has a majority or a veto. School governance will need specific attention. There are too many boards of governors, and many of them struggle to fill all of the places that are available. Many governors are appointed by affiliation rather than skill. Schools need to be governed in clusters, not individually, with greater inputs from parents and by boards comprised of individuals who are selected by their skill set, not their affiliation.
Teachers, in terms of initial teacher education, we had a world-renowned educationalist, Professor Pasi Sahlberg, who came over and gave us some ideas about what we could do about initial teacher education and its fragmentation in Northern Ireland. And his advice was ignored. We need to look at that again. Northern Ireland's too small to have 4 teacher education providers. We need to look at ways of doing that, a number of different models, a common college with twin campuses in Coleraine and Belfast or Derry or whatever. But whatever way we do it, crucially not divided by denomination. And we have to address pre-service teacher skills as well, ICT skills in particular. And also teaching is now different. Teachers are increasingly teaching in diverse classrooms, and we need to prepare them better for those diverse classrooms and in ways that promote inclusion. What we teach has to change as well. Our present curriculum in Northern Ireland has been about for about 15 years, and the revised curriculum as it once was, very exciting development, active learning and so on, but it needs updated, it needs reset, it needs rebooted, and aspects of it which have declined in importance. Citizenship, for example, which was core to the revised curriculum when it was first rolled out, has largely lost its way. We need to come back to that and look at that again. We need to have a curriculum that accommodates diversity and cultural perspectives. And what about empathy education?
The RE syllabus needs radical revision if we're going to secularise schooling and ensure that it is inclusive and representative of our current society. It needs to accommodate all faiths and none. It could, for example, include empathy education, promoting acceptance of diversity and better equipping teachers to address contentious issues in the classroom.
It's a chance to look at our education system as well. COVID-19 has exposed a lot of the aspects of education which actually are not working properly and which we need to improve upon. What about a baccalaureate system? And there should be opportunities to learn Irish in every school as well, and to play a range of sports in every school as well. Look at some of the content in the syllabuses as well, and the specifications, the history specification. Many teachers are already doing this in history, of course, but it can be avoided. Teaching about this place and how we got to where we are and its difficulties and challenges should be a core part of every youngster's education.
The current structure of school sectors needs to change. There needs to be an end of selection at age 11. We need to restructure the school types. Preschool, age 3 to 4, primary schools with a variable starting age, up to the age 11. Then follow something along the lines of the Dixon plan, with a junior high school from 12 to 14, followed by a senior high.
Or do we look at a system which is fully comprehensive? One which involves all young people inclusively. So you go to your local primary school and then you move to your local post-primary school. Inclusive, all ability schools serving the children of their neighbourhood. That's another way of doing it.
And finally, funding. Those schools who agree to the benchmarks we've suggested here would receive 100% funding. There would, however, be significantly lower levels of funding for those who opted to remain outside the system. These proposals are likely to affect and meet resistance from grammar schools. If they are to survive, these schools may need to consider other ways of funding themselves, becoming private, fee-paying.
So let's wrap this up, Matt. Will a move to a single system of education be easy?
No, it will not. It's going to be very challenging for many, but we have to do it, nevertheless.
And will it wipe away the divisions in our society straight away when it's implemented?
No, unfortunately, probably not. Schools will still be attended by one side or the other. There are structural divisions that this will take time to embed and to change.
So the residential separation of us keeps us apart to some extent. What about the haves and have-nots? Is that going to be addressed by this?
Again, probably not. It's an incremental process. There will still be schools in affluent areas, and it will still attract children from well-to-do families. But there will be many other places that will change our society fundamentally, and for generations to come. It'll release funding that can be used to be targeted where it's needed most.
And I think we can agree on the value of that. And I suppose ultimately the question isn't, should we be doing this? But rather, can we afford not to do it?